Okay, let's move on to the upper body because so many of us have issues related to shoulder pain and just not feeling good with all the typing that we do. Tell us a bit more about that.
So with the upper cross syndrome, now we're bringing it up here, and again, we're talking about that posture where we're rounded forward. In the first picture, we actually have neutral. The ears line up over the shoulders, line up over the hips. In the next view, with those lower body postures that we discussed earlier, with just the pelvic tilt, flat back, these two actually, when we don't keep our lower spine neutral, this is what happens to our upper body. Our heads come forward. When our heads come forward, we tighten these muscles right here, we tighten these muscles right here. I'm sure we've all experienced major knots in this area, no matter who you are or what you do. We have knots here. It's because of this. This gets tight, and everything back here gets tight. So when we're here, it's really hard for our shoulders to have good health because we're decreasing our joint space up here. A lot of us that sit forward are going to end up having what's called frozen shoulder. We start by slouching. We can't reach up as high as we could if we were standing upright, and we just stop using our shoulders because we're decreasing our range of motion. When that happens, we create shoulder problems, we create head problems, and we may not be able to get that back without moving.
So in fact, that's how I got interested in all of this, because I had a shoulder rotator cuff injury, and I went to the doctor, and he said, well, take ibuprofen for pain, and if in 2 weeks you're still having pain, we'll look at surgery. And I was like, no. And I started to look into how could I restore my muscles in such a way that I could get it working again. So I think we can look at the next graphic where you can explain something about how we can actually restore our muscles when we get an injury like that and actually come back even fitter than before. Can we take a look at the next graphic?
So in this graphic, this is an anatomy of the upper cross area. This is also called your pectoral girdle. It's just your pecs. So what happens in here is that these muscles back here are the ones that get really tight, where we find all those knots in your upper traps. What we need is to wake up this lower portion down here. These are called your lower trapezius muscles. You'll be able to exercise them by lifting your hands overhead. Really, a lot of us stop lifting our hands overhead over time. We just stop doing it. But it's very important to make sure you keep lifting your hands over your head to maintain shoulder strength back here and upper back strength.
Let's take a look at the next graphic, which I think shows some of that shoulder lifting.
So this is what ideal shoulder range of motion looks like. Your shoulder blade, this little plate of a bone back here, is required to move with your arm to allow maximum range of motion. Now, for the first 60 degrees of lifting right through here, your shoulder blade has to move on your rib cage. But when we sit with poor posture, our rib cage and our scapula end up becoming stuck together. With them not moving and allowing that free gliding motion, we start to lose mobility in the actual shoulder, and then we'll try to force it by making our arm just go further without our shoulder blade coming down and allowing that range of motion. When this happens, let's go ahead and look at the next graphic. When this happens, so here's a side view of what the joint looks like. If I were to take my arm off and show you guys what it looks like, this bone right here is called the acromion. This is back here, okay? And then this little tiny one in the front sits a little further, but we can't really feel that. But what happens is the head of the shoulder right here, this ball, ends up coming up and butting up against those two bony processes that stick out, and they compress our rotator cuff tendons, some of our bicep tendon, and also, not to mention, ligaments of the shoulder, and nerves also. And we start to get tingling in our fingers when that presses together. We start wearing down the bone on each other, creating constant pain, and then we just stop using our arm altogether.
So I really am inspired by this, Sheena. I think I got to understand that even though I was older, after doing about a year of physical therapy due to my shoulder rotator cuff injury, my physical therapist worked with me actually to strengthen all my other joints. And I wondered why I had waited so long. I wish that I had, in fact, done these exercises when I was in my teens or 20s, and I would have had greater mobility for decades. I think one of the important lessons of this is if we want to maintain mobility and agility throughout our lives, we have to take care of this most precious asset. Let's take a look at this inspiring picture about people having balance. Do you want to say a few words about this?
You know, I love this picture because what it shows is it's never too late to start. I'm sure that most of these people here didn't do yoga 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but they're doing it now and they're standing on one leg with their hands overhead. I'm sure if you try to do that right now, it's not the easiest thing. But if you keep practicing that, making sure you're gaining flexibility and mobility, and if you're in pain now, work within the ranges that are pain-free because eventually you'll push past that. Your muscles will allow you to increase your range of motion pain-free. Let's go ahead and look at the last picture. This is one of my favorites. This is an incredibly hard calisthenic move done by a lovely woman who has probably not done this her entire life. But the fact is, she can do it now. And she is doing it. And there's a bunch of other yoga poses that she's got pictures of. And I think it's a great inspiration to show that don't stop moving. And if you have, just get back to it. Because moving is the most important thing that you have to give your body.
So, thank you, Sheena. We've really looked at all of the intricacies of the human body. And Sheena has just helped us come to the tip of the iceberg about maintaining this. I think if you look at how much research is spending on artificial limbs, artificial legs, we will never own a more expensive and precious and valuable asset than our body. And yet we may take a lot more care of our cars or our television sets even, or our internet routers at home. When that's not working, you really go fix it. But here we've got the most precious asset we'll ever own our whole lives, and we need to start maintaining it. Do you want to send us off with the last few words, Sheena?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
So the important thing is the take-home message, take care of your body. It's way more complicated than your car, but we all know that your car is something that needs to be maintained year after year and making sure, otherwise you're not going to have it for 10 to 15 years. And we just, thanks all, thanks.